Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Command Point. My name's Ryan, and today I'm here with my co host Shane.
Hello, hello.
And today we have a special guest on, Chris Bacchi, the winner of the Dallas GT Kill Team Tournament. And you ran Pathfinders. Congratulations, Chris.
Thank you, thank you. It's great to be here, guys.
Yeah, so we have brought you on here to basically go ahead and dissect Pathfinders as a kill team. Shane and I ourselves are not Pathfinder players, so we're really interested in what you have to say about the team and what your decision was or why you chose to bring them to Dallas with you. So, Shane, if you want to go ahead and we can get started with some questions that you have for Chris here.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, not only are we not Pathfinder players, but I feel like it's not often that we see Pathfinder players around, I feel, especially at bigger tournaments these days. I mean, it's sort of making a comeback now, but wasn't really always that way for a long time. Chris, you used to play a lot more like meta teams forever ago, and then you kind of just like started doing your own thing and winning with whatever you wanted to win with. But now you've kind of jumped back into like a perceived, I guess, meta team. So first of all, have you been like a secret Pathfinder lover this entire time, or was this a I think the team is strong, I want to play this and win?
Definitely no secret Pathfinder lover over here. I'm definitely in the historic Pathfinder hater camp, and some of my most notorious games and opponents have been against Pathfinders. So, a lot of what led me to consider Pathfinders was in this post-LVO meta of looking for the team that would still be the shooty horde archetype that I enjoy playing and I think fits me pretty well, but a team that can handle some of the other big meta menaces like Felgor and Gellerpox. I've definitely been beating the Gellerpox drum for a long time. I think that team's still incredibly strong, and so I wanted a team that could go toe to toe with them. A lot of my thinking of with the nerfs that Vetguard received to the spotter and demo, and taking a look at the kind of boards that I play, especially on the West Coast with a lot of heavy, I wasn't sure how Vetguard could really compete with those really nasty Gellerpox and Felgor style teams. So Pathfinders caught my eye because they can handle things a little differently than Vetguard and don't have some of the same weaknesses. So that's what really drew me to Pathfinders, and I started taking them to a few local events and having some success with them. So I figured I had a decent shot of doing okay at Dallas with Pathfinders.
Yeah, and you did. You got the golden ticket. Congratulations again on that. That was a would you go 7-0?
Yes, I had an undefeated run, so winning the golden ticket at the end was definitely a really great prize.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. So I guess from like I said, I don't see Pathfinders a lot. I've never really played them too much. I haven't played against them a ton either. I think we have like one local Pathfinder player and then like I haven't had to play against it a lot at tournaments in my I guess history playing kill team. So I don't exactly like understand what makes the team tick. Like I see the team and I know it's good, but it just doesn't make sense to me of how people make it work. So how what is exactly your approach when you're playing the team? Obviously they're very killy, but I guess beyond that, how do you like to tackle this team?
Well, yeah, that's a great question. I have a little bit more of a conservative mindset toward how I approach Pathfinders than I think some other sort of semi-famous or maybe infamous, depending on your perspective, Pathfinder players of the past. I don't look a lot for alphas, these crazy Turning Point 1 alpha plays with Pathfinders. In my experience, I've played against those plays a lot, and I found them actually pretty predictable and easy to shut down with a lot of counterplay. I found the strategy that I found much harder to deal with is sort of the creeping dread quote unquote strategy with Pathfinders, where Pathfinders spent a lot of Turning Point 1 setting things up, getting in position, getting a lot of Markerlights out, and putting themselves in a position where they are able to completely dominate Turning Point 2, even if they lose initiative, through a combination of their fantastic poise, mobility, and ability to react. They can get basically impossible to dislodge from a lot of board states. And having 12 bodies just makes it so easy for them to control the tempo early, middle, and late game.
Really cool. And so I remember, so I've only really played the team, I think once, maybe ever, and it was forever ago. But I remember the having this weird feeling of like, I have 12 bodies, but I don't know who to go grab the midline objectives with. Like, it should be easy to just throw somebody forward and grab an objective because you have so many. Every time I play another horde team, I'm like, oh, there's this is the guy to go grab the objective. But with Pathfinders, it feels like they're all so capable of doing something on any given activation that there was like a paralysis, I guess, for me to decide who to, play scenario with and who to like kind of push forward the attrition game and the Markerlight game, I guess. So how do you like approach scoring on turn one?
That's a fantastic question, and it is not a problem that I had when I played Vetguard, because Vetguard
Yeah.
is very easy, very able to just throw a bunch of troopers into the grinder and not care about it. With Pathfinders, you are eventually going to need to take objectives, and you're going to need to pick your favorite child, so to speak, of who you sacrifice. Um, when I'm thinking about positioning, I generally don't aim for going 4-2 with Pathfinders, turning point one, unless I'm in a position where I can do that pretty safely. I prefer to not either eat those losses turning point one or at the start of turning point two. So I play a little more conservatively, and in a few games, I actually willingly did not try to compete for all objectives. I happily went 3-3 turning point one. And one notable game, I actually went 1-4 turning point one on primary
Ooh.
against Dakota's Vet Guard. So I'm pretty okay with slipping a little bit on turning point one, as long as that puts me in a position where turning point two forward, I'm able to dominate. As far as who I'm okay with losing, I prefer to not lose anyone on turning point one, but sometimes in the course of doing business, the gun drone bravely dies turning point one. That's something I sort of have to accept. Otherwise, I try to put myself in a position where turning point two, I might lose a few models, but definitely not on turning point one. Ironically, one of the models that I feel most comfortable losing is actually my leader. As soon as I'm in a position where I'll get my Art of War ability off, at that point the leader's just another body to me, and I'm pretty willing to sacrifice him.
Right. And I want to talk about Art of War, but I want to get back to that later. So one thing I think it's an interesting thing to highlight about Pathfinders is like when you're playing uh other teams, like horde teams, let's say, let's keep it at hordes, you can kind of, especially shooty hordes in particular, like Vetguard or Kroot or I don't know, Blooded, something like that. You can there's like two aspects of the game. There's scoring and there's killing. And that's like every activation, you're either setting up to score something or you're setting up to kill something or like stage to kill something later. But with Pathfinders, they have this like third aspect, which is the marker lighting, and and I guess you could wrap that up into the killing aspect. But it feels different to me because you're like allowing yourself later to up your attrition, and I think it seems to me like it's a hard kind of balancing act to get used to when learning the team. So I guess I want to ask how you approach marker lighting, and I guess I would assume we can talk about high intensity marker lights and stuff like that, and how that all plays into the whole marker lighting like game plan.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds funny on the surface to say it, but to be honest, after playing the team, and especially after a series of Pathfinder mirror matches I had the pleasure of playing at Dallas, marker lighting is actually a science. It is something that you have to really put a lot of thought into who's going to get the high intensity marker lights, and when at which point you're going to do an activation and throw the marker lights out, and how many activations it's gonna take you to follow up with the marker lights, and all of those are really really specific considerations. I try to get as many marker lights out as I can on turning point one, while not compromising the ability to get objectives off. That factors very heavily into where I place operatives. So I'm really going to focus on trying to deploy operatives in a position where they can still, ideally perform an action and get a marker light off. So, for example, with my comms operative, I'm going to really look for a spot where the two actions comms is going to do turning point one are going to be getting the double marker lights off and throwing an APL out. That's not always possible, but with a combination of being able to deploy with only a 25 mil base and recon sweep, you can do that pretty reliably with Pathfinders when you need to. So that's one, is just being conservative with actions, especially on turning point 1 to get those initial wave of marker lights out. The second is throwing extra APL to operatives who aren't your Soul Grenadier to give them the ability to move around, marker light something, and then maybe leverage the optic to bump up the enemy marker light count to something that gets really interesting. Specifically, those 4 and 5 marker lights on turning point 1, which allow you to change targeting selection and get really, really powerful.
So I know you played quite a few games on Into the Dark at Dallas, right?
I did. It was 3 on day 1. I got very sick of ITD on day 1, and only 1 ITD on day 2. But the majority of my games run Into the Dark.
Yeah, and I mean it's pretty impressive too, because obviously, I guess I'm about to ask you, but a lot of people have historically said the Pathfinders struggle on Into the Dark, and they've gotten buffs that were focused on making them better there. But what was your approach on Into the Dark, and do you feel like the buffs make a huge difference, or is it more of a playstyle adaptation for you? How does it feel for you to play Pathfinders on ITD?
It's absolutely a combination of, you have to seriously reorient your approach for how you're going to develop the early game. A lot of the cheeky stuff of getting in weird positions to get visibility to get marker lights off just doesn't exist on ITD. So those parts you can take off entirely, but absolutely the buffs that the team have gotten have played just massively into the team being effective in ITD. Specifically, the ability to do a marker light guard, and combining that with the ability to do free mission actions. And in a series of games, I was able to have an operative, for example, activate, open the door for free, marker light a target, and then go on guard, and then marker light it again, right? So a single operative is able to get 4 marker lights out in the series of just 1 activation.
Ooh, that is pretty good. So I guess that's a good segue into Art of War question, because they changed Kayan, I think it's called, recently,
Yep.
to it allows for free mission action now. And I think the initial impression to that buff was, well, we're probably still going to do Manka. But it sounds like you're using Kayan in particular in ITD. So can you walk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, having Cao Yon is usually the art of war I chose on Into the Dark, and it's something I actually considered on Open. It's amazingly effective on loot and secure, especially because it allows you to develop on Turning Point 1 to cover an amazing amount of the board and start taking objectives. One Into the Dark move that I made at one point was activating my recon drone and sending it into a room first activation, and securing an objective with it, using the drone controller's ability
Mm,
to analyze, or to control a drone, which really gave me a huge advantage in the tempo game there, of just immediately securing objective. And if your opponent doesn't have enough operatives on engage to counter it, that just puts you in a really, really strong position. So there's a lot of things that Cao lets you do that in practice is actually a lot stronger than Montka. Especially because it doesn't have a restriction for which order you're on. Montka, to get that dash, you have to be on engage. But Cao Yan, you get both benefits regardless of your order.
yeah. So I mean, you sort of said like loot and ITD. So what are like? How are you deciding typically on a game by game basis which one? Do you know going in, or is it like top of turn 2 and it's like, oh, this is the time to use Maka? I'm gonna lock that in now.
Generally, I aim to use my Art of War on Turning Point 2, where I think overall more operatives are going to benefit from it either way, and
Mhm.
it's going to make a bigger impact on the game overall. I've been playing a lot of Pathfinders on ITD specifically, though, and I've actually started adjusting my mindset to think of using Cao Yan on Turning Point 1 as well. Um, what factors into doing it has a lot to do with how many marker lights I want to get out. If I want to be able to move up, take positions, and secure objectives, and get marker lights on turning point 1, the only way I'm going to do that on ITD is through using Kauyon. So I used it a fair number of times. I think 3 out of my 4 Into the Dark games, I used it on turning point 1. And it was definitely awesome to have as a tool there. Another, just really, really terrifying thing that you can do with this is you can forward deploy up a gun drone, and again, have just in the tank. You can flip it to engage, move, open a door, and start shooting into a room. And the fact that at any point you could start doing that is something that's pretty intimidating to deal with, and something that Monk Ka isn't going to necessarily give you.
Yeah, because ultimately it's sort of sometimes they're giving the same thing at the end of the day because you know, you're either move dashing, you know, um, and tapping an objective with the free dash, or you're move dashing, tapping an objective with the free mission action. So I
Yep.
guess it sort of just depends on like where those edge cases are going to crop up more. Um, so I guess I'm going to try to walk through this in my brain. So like using it on ITD on turn one, is it like you're recon sweeping with the strategic play to dash up on turn one on the sides, and then Kaoyan, and then you now have most of your team is at least in range of like a door that you can run up on, open Markerlight, and now that door's open, and the rest of the team can Markerlight through that door on that side. Is that like sort of what's happening there?
Um, it tends to be I tend to not want to focus a lot of operatives through the same doorway because if there's a situation where a lot of my operatives are able to sort of see and shoot through that door, they're either also close to the door that they're it's that Simpsons meme, I'm in danger,
Yeah.
or they're backed up far back enough where they're not going to be able to impact enough of the game. So what tends to happen in practice when I'm using Kaoyona this way is I've got a very spread out team, and I'm opening a ton of doors and sitting a bunch of Pathfinders just sort of like in those open hatchways, moving up, getting into the hatchway, and then going on guard. So it tends to be I'm opening a large volume of doors and using those free mission actions to again open a lot of the doors on my side and or securing or looting objectives at the same time. Something I might do, for example, in my game with Mike Cortez, is I was concerned about my leader getting caught in a room with a high intensity marker light on guard, opponent to start getting marker lights on my leader. So one of the things I was considering was using Cao Yon to have the leader be able to open the door, move forward, use holographic readout to then do the mission action for free on the objective, and then dash back. Right. So within one activation, the leader's effectively doing 4 actions, keeping himself sort of out of harm's way.
And I guess like matchup wise, you played Higher Tech a bunch at Dallas. You played I want to say you played the mirror match twice
The mirror match
and
twice, and Vetguard once, and Mandrakes once.
Mandrake. So I guess those matchups, I guess if you want to really quickly run through, like, how do you feel about those matchups for Pathfinders?
I was incredibly worried about the Hyrotech matchup going into this event. I thought that I thought Hyrotech was a pretty decent answer to Pathfinders because their ability to just completely instant nuke an operative isn't that exciting when that operative can come back later and then use that activation it gets to do a ton of damage in the Pathfinder backfield. So this was something I was pretty concerned about going into the event. The higher tech matchups specifically, I think thankfully on day one we're into the dark, where I was very comfortable with that matchup, and I think my opponents really struggled with the idea that whenever there was a room, an objective in a room, the vast majority of ITD maps, these objectives sit there in a room, and the only way you can have cover is by putting a barricade on them. And if that's what you're using for protection, marker lights can peel you off of it. And so, sort of the catch-22 is the the Immortals and Despotech and Deathmark, needed to be far enough forward to start affecting the game. But if they tried to do that on turning point one, or they tried to secure an objective, they would get marker light and shot off the board. And the plasma sites, there simply weren't enough of them to try to use those to be scoring objectives. So both of my higher tech opponents struggled a lot to balance that on turning point one, and ended up having losing models turning point one off, getting marker lights off, and having them get shot off the board. So that was a really really oppressive problem for the higher techs to deal with, which I think being on ITD helped that a lot. So those were the higher tech matchups. My first game on day one was the Pathfinder Mirror. It was on open, and it was something that I had been thinking about for a long time. I knew Mike Cortez was coming to Dallas with Pathfinders, and I had seen his legendary games with John, Can You Roll a Crit, over from Nova 2022, where Mike played those matchups really, really well. And so his experience in the matchup was something I was worried about. But I was able to pull ahead through a combination of lucky rolling for initiative, and I managed to put my recon drone in a really, really great place. So it started being able to rain death down with that burst cannon and get some good chain activations off. Let's see. My game on day one against the Mandrakes player was another great game. I pulled ahead pretty early on, getting rid of the Dirgema and then Chooser of the Flesh at the start of Turning Point 2, which is pretty bad for my opponent. But my opponent played it excellently and reacted by moving out of a room, which I started controlling, and moving all of his Mandrakes onto the other half of the board and sort of stealing it from under my feet, pulling the rug out from me. So those are my games day one. Day two started with a game against Dakota Luster's Vet Guard. Fantastic player, Dakota, really, really great. I could finally play him in a tournament. And I had been on his side of the Vet Guard Pathfinder matchup a ton of times. So basically what I did was I just channeled all of my PTSD with the things that I was afraid of Pathfinders doing to me, and basically did that to him, and it ended up being pretty effective. So that's a general recap of most of my games, and then my last game, and I can go into it if you want, was against Leander's Hyrotech on Open for the finals match, and that game was pretty wild.
Yeah, I mean, just give us the cliff notes on that finals game because I'm curious.
Well, what decided the game happened really early. First of all, the board was pretty open, which was a problem with both midfield objectives. It was a hamburger deployment map, and the midfield objectives were only protected by light cover, which was really, really difficult for either team to deal with, but especially because it was capture. The only way Hyrotech could take those objectives was by putting models on them, and Leander was left with really, really bad choices. If he did this with plasmacytes, he risked his plasmacytes being out of position and potentially just being EMP grenaded off the board, and losing his plasmacytes early, which he would really, really need for late game scoring. But if he tried to do it with an Immortal or Despotech, they just get Markerlight and shot off the board pretty easily instead. So he didn't really have a lot of great options for trying to exert board control Turning Point 1. This was also a map that definitely had a better side and a worse side. He won the role and chose attacker for attacker defender role, and I chose the quote good side, which helped me tremendously. So that was sort of the going into the match, what was disadvantaging Leander. But the biggest swing that happened was near the end of Turning Point 1. He had forward deployed his Death Mark and had his Death Mark ready to go with that weird nanoscarab grenade thing, and he was going to use that to kill my gun drone. My gun drone was concealed behind heavy cover, but in a position that was pretty easily visible to Leander, and so Leander was getting his Death Mark ready to go use nanoscarabs to kill my gun drone. So at that point, I was left with a choice of I could risk eating the shot, potentially lose gun drone, potentially the gun drone lives, or I can have the gun drone have fun, live its best life, and go try to kill something. And one of the things that was near the gun drone was the reanimator plasmacyte, which I specifically have a vendetta against. So I flipped my gun drone to engage. It had a +1 APL from the comms I gave it earlier, and I sort of zoomed it right over to the reanimator plasmacyte and killed it, which is a pretty expected outcome. Those things are pretty fragile, and the gun drone is nuts. At this point, Leander was left with a decision. If he reanimated the reanimator, that burned his reanimation for the Turning Point, and the reanimator is still a token anyway, so he wouldn't be able to reanimate anything else if it died. If he didn't reanimate the reanimator, he would be able to potentially protect his exposed death mark against the retribution which was about to follow this attack. Leander made the choice to let the reanimator go, and I think that this choice lost him the game. I did not have much of a follow-up attack, and the follow-up attacks I had, I actually didn't commit. So I didn't commit my Grenadier, and I had my Transpectral take a shot, but it did no damage. So going into Turning Point 2, I was down a gun drone, but Leander was down his reanimator, and for the rest of the game, he could only ever reanimate one operative a turn, which was simply not nearly enough to handle the sort of classic Turning Point 2 bloodbath that goes for almost every game.
Yeah, as a higher tech player, the moment you have to make that choice, it feels like the game is kind of out of. It's like you've lost the tempo. It's a really bad choice to have to make. But yeah, really interesting. I guess I wanted to ask you because I mentioned earlier I don't really get Pathfinders in terms of me playing them. I haven't played them a lot, but I'm sure if I would play them a bunch, I would click at some point. But I will say I've played against them recently in a tournament on TTS against a pretty high ranking Pathfinder player, and I sort of like brain labbed that matchup for myself on the higher tech side. And one thing that I sort of started to realize, and I'm curious to get your thoughts on this, was that I think it's really easy on the other side of the Pathfinders to kind of overrate their ability to be a good scoring team. Because you see 12 bodies, you see a shooty horde, you think of all the other shooty hordes that are great at scoring, and you sort of lump them in rather than thinking of them as more of a attrition team. Um, and the moment I kind of accepted that and started thinking of the matchup from that perspective, it became easier for me to wrap my head around it a little bit and figure out ways to beat them. Do you think this sort of tracks with your experience? Like, do you always feel like they're not the most amazing mission team? And if your opponents respect it, or I guess had less respect for that aspect of your game, it would be easier for them to beat you, maybe?
1,000%. And in fact, all the games that I was getting pressed on and started, slipping away from me were because my opponents poked me in the spot that Pathfinders aren't good at, exactly the scoring. Pathfinders are super, super unlike Vetguard in the sense that they aren't great at dominating scoring. I think you see that in some of Dakota's stats as well, that Pathfinders, outside of a low win rate, also have a low average scoring rate. And this is because, again, I think when Pathfinders lose, they lose hard. And yes, they win hard when they do well. But once they start losing bodies, they start having to make really hard choices of how to spend the few action points they have remaining. So that tracks 100%. And that also tracks 100% with my anti-Pathfinder game plan. I've gone into Pathfinders a fair amount of time, especially as Vetguard and Blooded. And one of the things that I always do against Pathfinders is I start hugging them. So I'm focused on just not getting killed early, taking a bunch of points, and I'm not even trying to kill them. I'm not looking for any power plays. I'm looking for charge, sometimes charge pass, and then the next turn find ways to charge somebody else in, secure an objective, then activate another one, kill the target, charge someone else, and get that get the hugging train going. That was also very much how I managed to beat Mike Cortez in our second mirror match, where he got ahead of me on kills and he started pulling ahead, and he was just in a better position strategically to kill my stuff. But what I realized was I had a slight lead on primary, and if I just charged past him, he couldn't fall out of combat quickly enough to flip the objectives back for me. So that's exactly what I did, where I just had a Pathfinder brawl, sort of chasing him around for the rest of the game, and was able to just have just enough actions to keep flipping objectives back for me. And I was in combat too much, and there wasn't enough CP left for him to reliably shoot me. So 100%, that is a huge weakness of Pathfinders.
Nice. I love that. I wish I could have watched some of these games. I just need Games Workshop to stream some of these events just so we have the footage. But really interesting to think about. I guess on the topic of scoring, Pathfinders, TAC op wise, have access to recon and nothing else, and they've got some interesting faction TAC ops. So I wanted to ask you, what do you like to do with your TAC ops?
I default to taking Killing Blow. It one of the biggest problems with Killing Blow is you need to have enough operatives on engage turning point 1. And so something that my opponents at Dallas likely noticed was that I had a ton of my team on engage every single game turning point 1, which in general is a problem because it obviously limits the positions you can be in. It's easier for somebody to retaliate against you. But at the end of the day, Pathfinders do reign supreme over the shooting game. So if somebody does really want to challenge you on that turning point 1, you're going to be pretty good at handling whatever they throw at you. So Killing Blow is a pretty strong default choice for me, and it would take a lot to make me not take Killing Blow. I have considered it before, and occasionally I'll take the other tack op for mark enemy movements. That's the one where you need to Markerlight your opponent. The biggest problem with this, of course, is that if whatever you're marker lighting, you generally want to kill. And I really, really don't like tac ops that make me not kill something. I'm okay
Yeah.
with passively scoring, but especially some of those infiltration tac ops where you can't kill a specific target. Those
Oh, yeah.
really cramp my style, and I'm not a fan. Some people say they get success out of them. I don't get it. And then the last one that I've never taken, I haven't really seriously considered it, is Patient Hunter. That's one where you have to do more mission actions than your opponent and have more of your team have a conceal order. I don't get why you would ever take this tac op. Going ahead on primary turn point 1 is a very often counter pick to Pathfinders. So people are going to try to do this to you. It's not something the team excels in. And even if you are able to get it turning point 1, trying to finagle a way to get this later on in the game and keep half of or more of your team on conceal just seems like suicide to me. So this one I've just taken off the table.
Interesting. Okay, really cool. And how about the regular recon tac ops? What do you typically default to?
Definitely, obviously recover points is a great one. That's the
Yep.
recover item tack up. I though am very comfortable not getting this turning point 1. I pretty commonly got the second point on this tack up, turning point 3, and sometimes a couple games turning point 4. I'm very, very happy to let this go turning point 1. I do not make a mad scramble to try to take it. So that's something I've definitely noticed I see in other Pathfinder players. And whenever other Pathfinder players do this, I was always happy. I was always like, yes, this guy put a point halfway up the table and then scrambled to get a model to that point. Awesome. I can charge it. I can kill it. Like, that was always made me happy. So when I started playing Pathfinders, I'm like, wait, like, it'll happen. I'll get the points eventually. I'll focus on killing and getting a good turning point 2 position. And that worked out really, really well for me. One of the other it's either secure vantage or secure unexplored rooms, I think is great for Pathfinders. Pathfinders really often want to have a really obnoxious gun drone or recon drone sitting up on a vantage point. So scoring points off being obnoxious, of course, is always a good thing. And then some combination of surge forward, outflank, and sometimes plant transponder will take the third slot.
Okay. Really cool. Really cool. All right, we're nearing the end here, Chris. So I just want to ask you a couple rapid fire questions. Um, uh, what are the nightmare matchups for Pathfinders?
It's Felgor for sure. Felgor and ITD. It's a matchup that I played a bunch. I can't master it. I was able to pull ahead of it. Basically what I consider by luck a few times. Gives me nightmares.
Okay, but why is it also Farstalker Kinband?
So I've heard rumors of Farstalker Kinband. I cannot convince any of my locals to play Farstalkers. There was a pretty cool, strong local player, Garrett, who was playing Farstalker, but I think he finally dropped them after he's just a fantastic player and couldn't get the results he needed out of them. Yeah, they might be a good answer to Pathfinders. Legitimately, I do see it.
It's half of a joke. I've been telling people this lately that I think that they're actually okay into Pathfinders, and I do believe it. But otherwise, I mean, I had another question. I'm just thinking about Kroot now, and my thoughts
So
have
while
just
we're on the topic of Kroot, what is it specifically about the Kroot team that both of you guys think might have some play into the Pathfinder team?
I can answer this because I've been thinking about it, and then Chris, you can tell me what you think about my thoughts. So I think the Kroot in general are a very good scoring team, which we've discussed is a pretty good strategy against Pathfinders. They are a very bad killing team, but their offense, while bad overall, is perfectly fine into Pathfinders. So it's like you're playing the regular Kroot amazing scoring game into a team that you can actually kill, so they no longer feel like a dumpster. Um, and their faction ability Rogue, which I think is across the board not particularly good, is probably very good into Pathfinders. Pathfinders can have the no cover rule, but Rogue just ignores it. A lot of their guns are just not AP but high damage, and they've got a few AP weapons, but a lot of high damage shots, which Kroot can use their double retain on to survive some of the brutal Pathfinder shooting. And you have the flexibility to shoot them off the board with some of your guys or charge them in melee and actually kill them. So that's my approach as to why I think Pathfinder or Kroot is actually kind of a decent counter pick into Pathfinders. And Chris, what do you think of all that?
I agree. Another thing that Pathfinders don't like is they don't like fighting other teams that have a lot of bodies, because exactly that problem. It sort of spreads their focus out. They can't get, Pathfinders just want to play, paint something with 5 or 6 marker lights and then go to town on it. Kroot make that a huge problem because there's 12 of them. They're fast. They're going to get in your grill really, really quickly. And then exactly they ignore the no cover part of the marker lights, which means if you don't slap 4 hits into that Kroot, you're not killing it. So that's a huge problem, just how long it takes for you to get all the marker lights out that you'll need to make it happen. And so a lot of these speculative shots aren't going to work. The way Pathfinders do a ton of damage, in these matchups in general, is they can reliably, they're going to throw their 4 dice, they're going to get 2 hits and reroll into a third. And against a lot of targets, that's going to kill them. A lot of targets will generally only make 1 save, and then they'll perish. But because Kroot ignore that, they have a huge leg up in a lot of those shooting situations. They're not going to survive a shot from a gunner. No one is. Yeah, that's just cost in business.
Yeah. So next question I had to ask, if you had one way to nerf Pathfinders, what would you do?
I think Pathfinders are almost in a good place, other than letting the recon drone be taken for 1 slot. I think the recon drone costing 2 returns an interesting amount of sort of list building back to Pathfinders, and you would see Pathfinders get run in either the 11 or 12 operative configurations if you made that change. I think to me, that's basically like the perfect change. And also, it really specifically slows them down against Space Marines and elite teams, where they really want to bring the recon drone, and it takes a whole operative off the board if they do that.
Very cool. And I guess, was there anything else I had to ask? Ryan, did you have any questions?
Yeah, so you briefly mentioned Space Marines just now. How do you think they play against the most recent elite team, Nemesis Claw?
I've played Pathfinders against Nemesis Claw a couple times, and I think Nemesis Claw has some interesting tools to help with activation order through a combination of Vox, Scream, and the Foreboding. However, I don't think these tools are enough to fundamentally change anything about the matchup, and the lack of durability tools and the fact that the Night Lords focus a lot on a lot of melee bonuses and denying rerolls means that there's no fundamental change with Night Lords from any other elite team, and Pathfinders and Night Lords player skill being equal. I'd say Pathfinders take that matchup 99 out of 100 times.
Okay, really cool. So I think we're pretty much wrapped up here. Chris, thank you so much for coming on and talking to us about the greater good, so to speak.
Yeah.
We really appreciate you coming on, and congratulations again on doing well at Dallas.
Thank you guys. It's always great being here. Looking for the next one.
Yeah, and thank you to everybody for watching. Subscribe if you're enjoying our content and you aren't already subscribed. Special shout out to everybody over at patreon.com/commandpoint. If you are subscribed at the Weird Boy tier, which we've been getting more and more each day, there's a new bat wrap up of me playing Farstalker Kinband. So you can go check that out because we were just talking about crew. Ryan, any final thoughts?
I don't like the Tau. That's my final thought.
I'm a Tau hater as well. I'm not playing the team anymore. I'm back to being one of the good guys.
And so, what is a good guy faction for you?
I'm thinking of going back to Blades. Actually, I love the Blades of Cain.
Okay, I guess they're good guys. I guess they're good guys comparatively speaking.
Comparatively speaking.
Yeah.
All right, thank you everybody. This is Shane, Ryan, and Chris signing out.